In this lecture, we're going to explore how PHP uses sessions to manage user data across web pages. This is an essential skill for building the login systems and protecting private content. Okay, so let's start with a question. How can we remember a user from one page to another in PHP, especially after they log in? So the answer is using sessions. So PHP sessions, they allow us to store information like user ID, name, or role across multiple pages. And this is essential for login sessions. So the different functions that we have with this is when we have this sessions start. And this function, this is what starts a session or say resumes a current one. And it's got to be called at the very top of the script before it say any output is added. And it creates a unique session ID that tracks the user's data. Then is the global or super global associative array called sessions, and this holds the different session variables. Now, if you remember, associative arrays, they store variables using a key value combination. So you have this named key, which is session username, and it's storing our user's name John123, and then we have the named key role, which is storing the admin. And then when we have this information, that means that once it's stored in the session, this data can be accessed from any page in that session. Okay. Then we have what's called the session destroy, and this function, this ends the session and deletes all the session data on the server. And so this is used during, say, the logout in order to be able to, say, clean up, any sessions that are out there. And the thing is, session data is going to be stored on the server, not the browser. The browser only keeps the session ID, say, in a cookie. And this makes sessions more secure than cookies, for storing sensitive information like user IDs. Now let's talk about access control. This is making sure only logged in users can access protected pages. Now a typical login check might look like this script here on the left side here. So if the user, say for instance, is not logged in, then we'll redirect them using this header location. And so we're redirecting our user back to the login screen. This function will send the HTTP header to the browser, telling it, say, to go somewhere else. So in the second example here on the right, say they did authenticate, they were signed in, the user was logged in, then maybe we would redirect the user to maybe the dashboard. Now, don't forget the exit, because the exit, it stops the script from continuing. Now, logging out isn't just about sending the user to the login page. It's about cleaning up all the session data. Now, why clearing up session matters? One is it prevents someone else, say, from using an open session. It's going to remove any sensitive data from the server, and then it helps protect against session hijacking or fixation attacks. So this session start, this starts or resumes the current session. You must call this before working with any kind of sessions. And then the session destroy, this deletes all of the session data on the server. It's like wiping the slate clean. Then the header, like we saw in the previous slide, this is what's going to send the user to the login page. And then, of course, the exit, always use this after a redirect in order to make sure no other code runs. So now this is a very simple script, and it works well when, say, you don't need to remove specific session variables manually. You don't need to deal with maybe, you use this if you don't need to deal with like session cookies and things like that. PHP will handle most of that by default. So this is the one that we'll be using within our demo. Now, just to summarize, you want to use session start to begin tracking your users. And then you store your data securely using that super global session, super global array, associative array sessions. And then you want to have protected pages using a simple access control check, making sure that the user is logged in, on any of your protected pages. And then what you want to do is you want to always redirect unauthorized users using that header function. And then always clear sessions securely during logout. Okay, so let's look at a demo of how we can utilize this. And hopefully you're watching this as part of the series of videos, so you would have had some of the scripting already created that we're going to be working with. Okay, so you can get an idea of what we're going to be writing. We're going to take our login script that we've already created. We're going to modify it a little bit. So if the user is not authenticated, then what we're going to do, and this is so this is how you kind of write a flow, a user flow, so that you can kind of know how you're going to be redirecting as far as your pages. But if the user is not authenticated when they go to log in, then we're going to send them back to the login page. Um, but if they are authenticated, then what we're going to do is we're going to allow them to um, view the user portal pages. Remember, we talked about protected pages. So these would be, protected pages that only authenticated users would be able to log into. And then when the user was ready, and if they wanted to log out, it would direct them to the logout page, which would have the script to destroy those sessions, and then it would redirect them back to the login page. So if you haven't booted up your Infinity free or whatever web hosting that you're using and getting into your pages, then go ahead and do that now. And so if you're following me from um, the previous lecture where we built the login page and we built a user registration page and we registered a user, um, you kind of have to go back and look at that and build those out. But I'm going to take my existing login page and that's what I'm going to be using. Now, if you don't recall, because remember when we saved the passwords in our database, they were, they weren't like, out there where we could actually see them. So if you recall, we had hashed it. So if you don't remember what your password was, then what you can do is go back into the user register, register a new user. Just make sure that you write down what the name of that not the name, but the actual password was. Okay, so I'm going to go into my login page, okay? And note, remember we talked about, for the session start, we always want to start or resume a current session. And you've got to call this again before you call any other, working with any of the sessions and any of the scripts that you have. So, that's the reason why we're calling this at the top here. So just wanted to make a note of that. And then also on our existing script, we have where we're storing the username into this session username. Okay, so we're actually storing it here. So we want to, this is our super global that we talked about, our associative array. And so we're storing that username into that session so that we can now utilize that, pull that information out, on our various different pages. Now, what we're going to change here, we're going to change this. Remember here, what we were doing was we were just basically on the login page, just telling the user that they had successfully logged in and actually, rendering as far as their name. I'm going to just comment that out. I'm not going to delete it, just in case you want to refer back to it. But remember what we're going to do here this time, instead of keeping them on this page, remember in our flow, what we wanted to do is we wanted to redirect them to the user portal page. Okay, we haven't created that, but we're going to be creating that. So let's go ahead and do that using header, and then we say location and user portal.php. That's the page that we're going to be directing them to. Oops. So I'm going to just put some comments here. Direct to user portal page. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. Now, one other thing that I need to do if you are using your existing page is, if you recall down here, our action was this login.php page. But what we want is we want this header, this redirect to actually take. We're going to be using this page to do our scripting. Okay, and we don't want, so we're going to just take this out for now. We don't really need that there, okay? Because what we want to do is we want to redirect using this. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, okay? And then everything else should be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and close it. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to create that user portal page, okay? So new file, and I'm going to call this user portal. That was the name that I used in my login script. Okay, and on this page I'm going to start with, of course, my PHP. And like I said, you want to always start with the session start. And I didn't type that right. Okay, and so what I want to do first is I'm on the user portal page, okay, and if they authenticate it, okay, then I want to, and my user flow was a little off, but forgive me for that. But this is the actual page that I'm going to have them authentic, that I'm going to check that authentication. Okay, I should have kind of wrote that in that user flow, but just so that you know. So this is the page where I'm going to check to see if they were properly authenticated. And so I'm checking that super global. Okay, and say for instance they weren't. Okay, they weren't authenticated. That's what I'm checking here. I'm saying if they're not, if it, there's no session username, that it didn't actually store a value in there, then I'm going to redirect them back to the login page. Okay. All right. Now, if they, and then don't forget that, remember we have to call that exit. Don't forget that. Okay. So if they did not authenticate, meaning that on that previous page, nothing got stored in this global because it wasn't valid, okay, then I'm going to redirect them. So this basically, I mean, this isn't really, the login page was your authenticator. It was checking to see if they were valid in the database, and if they weren't, then it told them that it wasn't valid. But this is really, each of your pages, each of your protected pages should have a script like this at the beginning, okay? Because what you don't want is, you don't want them seeing any part of that page. So it's doing like almost like a second authentication, if you want to consider it that. Again, that first page, when we were looking at it in our diagram, this was where the authentication was going to say, was their user information, was their password validated by the database? And then if not, then they would stay on this page. If it was authenticated, they would go to the user portal page. But again, on each of the protected pages, you want to have this kind of second check. You just want to make sure, because some people might remember what the page name was and they might bypass the login page, or maybe they bookmarked it or something like that, and you still don't want them to be able to access that page. Okay. All right, so if, for instance, and again, that's why we put this at the very top, and as long as this page doesn't get, as long as the user doesn't get redirected to the login page, then the HTML portion will render. Now, I'm going to just kind of do some copy and paste for my HTML, so give me a second for that. Okay, now of course you would have more than this in your HTML page. I'm just kind of simplifying it right now, just to save time as far as typing. So if, for instance, they don't get redirected, then this HTML portion is going to render, and I'm just going to have something like welcome. Okay, and I'm going to just echo out as far as the session. And then what I'm also going to do is, and you know, again, you can style this how you want. I want to give them a log out, because I'm going to also create a log out page as well. Remember, I told you the log out page is what you're going to be using to destroy, as far as any of the existing sessions, to kind of clean the slate. So I'm going to create a link that's going to be to the logout page, and then the logout page is going to handle as far as cleaning up the session and things like that. And again, you can style this however you want. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Okay. And now let's go ahead and let's create that logout page. Okay, so we've got our user portal. We've modified our our login. So I'm going to create this logout PHP. Okay, and so basically all this is going to do is it's going to basically destroy the session and then redirect them back to the login page. Okay, so again, still have to call that session start because we're still working with the sessions. Okay, and now we are going to destroy the session. Okay, and then we're going to do that redirect back to the login page, and then don't forget the exit. Okay, and that's all we need. We don't need any HTML on here because all we're doing is just destroying the session and then redirecting them. Okay, so the first thing was that login page. So let's go ahead and check that everything. So this was my page. Now what I'm going to do, because I've been before I created that session and things like that, and I've never destroyed the session. I'm going to go ahead and do a log out just so that I can clear that session. Okay, and so it took me to the login page, which it destroyed the session for me, and then redirected me. So you may want to do that first because again, if you worked with the previous lecture where we actually did create that initial login page, you did create a session and you probably never destroyed that session, and so it may still be existing. So now we've cleared that session. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to create my user, add my user information and my password. And again, if you don't remember what yours is, then what you can do is just register a new user. I'm going to go log in and see it has, We'll close out. We don't need that. And it's taken me to that welcome test user. Remember, that was that user portal page that we created. So it's redirected me to the user portal page. Okay. So I can put, now I can have anything, all the different things that I want the authenticated user to be able to access, here in this information. I can have multiple pages as long as I do that check that we looked at here. I'm going to go back here just so that you can see it. As long as we do this check at the top of each of the pages that we want only authenticated users to view, then it'll stay. And then eventually, not stay, but it will authenticate. The session will be live and it will check, and the session will be validated, for every one of those pages. And then when we're done, okay, then we can have a logout button or something like that, and then they click the logout button, and then it takes them back to the login screen. Okay, so basically, if you're watching this video as part of my course, then this is how you're going to be creating the assignment to create as far as sessions and authentication. All right, so other than that, happy coding.